Okay, we're with Jeremy Dice of the First Liberty Institute today. How you doing?
I'm doing very well.
So, what are the details of the Mariah Bridges case regarding her school's requirement that they edit her graduation speech?
Yeah, well, Mariah Bridges was, as you said, a high school graduate here recently and was asked by the school or the student class president there to provide the closing remarks for their graduation ceremony. And so she prepared them and the school reviewed them at some point. And the superintendent communicated back to Mariah that effectively the comments were too religious and they needed to be edited or she couldn't give the speech. So at the end of the day, she didn't know what her rights actually were at the time and was a little shocked and surprised and frankly saddened that she had to remove all references to her Christian identity from the speech, but she wanted to still to do something. So she did give a speech, but it happened to be very sanitized from what she had originally given. And so what we've done is she contacted us after the fact, and we've sent a letter to the Beaver Area School District to let them know that what they did there was wrong, and frankly, it's illegal. Students don't shed their constitutional rights when they walk through the schoolhouse gates, and they carry those rights all the way through the graduation ceremony.
Awesome. So, what interested you most about this case?
Well, what interests me is that this is not the first time that this has ever happened, and it keeps on happening, frankly. I would think that by now most superintendents across the country would have read the United States Department of Education guidelines that were put out way back in, I think, 2003 or 2005, somewhere in that range, that very specifically deal with this and say that so long as students are selected through genuinely neutral criteria, which Mariah was, and retain primary control over their remarks, which Mariah had, and then the school district cannot get rid of religious content or otherwise anti-religious sentiment as well. That's private speech by a student, and it's protected by the First Amendment.
I see. So, are there any legal precedents for a case like this?
Yeah, I mean, quite a few. And number one, it's important to remember that Mariah lost her civil rights for just a moment, and the Supreme Court calls that an irreparable harm. But more specifically to the question of the speech itself, the Supreme Court has said more than once that when a state endeavors to say we prefer this viewpoint rather than a religious viewpoint, we call that viewpoint discrimination, and it's one of the most egregious forms of First Amendment violations that we can think of, because it's effectively the state saying that, look, you can give a speech, you can talk, so long as you agree with what we tell you to believe. Well, that's why the First Amendment was put into place in the first place. The Establishment Clause restrains the United States government, including school districts like this. It tells them that they need to be neutral towards religion rather than, as they were here, hostile towards it all. And also at the same time, the Free Exercise Clause protects students' private acts of religious expression, as it does here as well. So the Supreme Court has been clear on this. The United States Department of Education has issued guidelines that speak directly to it. I'm not entirely sure why this had to come to a head, especially on a day like graduation day that was to be one of Mariah's highlights of her high school career.
Awesome. So, would the school have any kind of leg to stand on in its assumption that this would violate the Establishment Clause in the Constitution?
No, look, these were private remarks developed by Mariah that were protected by the Free Exercise Clause. And so certainly it is, if there was any concern about that, courts have said, including the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, they've reminded school districts that they can disclaim the message of the student, and they can tell everybody that this is not our message, this belongs to the student. And in fact, that's the preferred method of handling these situations. The solution, the court has said, is not to censor or squelch the speaker, but to meet it with more and better speech. And I wish the school district here had done that very thing.
Awesome. So is a case like this typical for the First Liberty Institute?
Well, at First Liberty Institute, we are working to defend religious liberty for all Americans, and we do that within the United States military, making sure our service members have their religious liberty within the public square, so when you go out to work and other places, you have the right to be able to express your religious beliefs and exercise them. We do that, of course, in the church as well, because that's a very central place with it, whether that's a church or synagogue or mosque. We want to make sure that people are free to exercise their religious beliefs. But we also work to protect religious liberty within the schools themselves. And so I'm saddened to say that we have represented multiple high school graduate speakers that have been, in some cases, threatened even with the potential of arrest by a court if they actually went through with providing religious remarks at their graduation ceremony. We had another high school graduate who the principal took a black marker and put black censor bars through his speech, a copy of his speech, anytime it mentioned anything religious. And so we've seen this time and time again, and I can go on about cases in which students were not allowed to form a religious club on campus, or one student who wanted to read his Bible during free reading time at school and was told he couldn't read that book during that free reading time, and on and on. But the reality is this, as I said before, the Supreme Court has been very clear. Students do not shed their constitutional rights when they walk through the schoolhouse gates.
Awesome. That's all the questions I've got. Anything you'd like to add?
I just encourage folks to go to firstliberty.org/bridges, where they can actually read the letter that we sent to the school district there at the Beaver Area School District. And I would also encourage especially students and parents of students to go to firstliberty.org and download our Know Your Rights toolkit so that you know what your rights are at the public schools and you can exercise them when it comes your turn.
Awesome. Thanks. I'll send you a link to the video when I get it up, okay?
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.